Well, good morning, guys. You guys always come out so weak right after something like that. You're all emotional. You're tearing up now. Good morning, guys. See, that's all it takes. I don't know what happens with it. Well, if you are stepping in, you're coming in at the third section of a 3-week study that we've been doing on the book of Psalms 23, in Psalms 23. So if you want to go and get your Bibles out, we're going to dig right back into that today. We're going to jump in pretty quickly to be able to make sure we get all the meat and potatoes of what we have before us. Now, in the last 2 weeks, we have covered verses 1 through 4. The first week, we're going through 1 through 3. And again, if you've not been through these or if you missed any of these, I highly encourage you on this series to go back and pick them up on the video podcast through our church website, which is just TSF, our initials, tsflife.com, and be able to catch up because they really do fit together. But the first week, we talked about those moments as we lean into the Lord as our own personal shepherd. Again, that we have this great opportunity through the sacrifice, the death, the resurrection of Jesus Christ to make God, Yahweh, the God of all things, creator of all things, our own personal shepherd in an intimate way, a passionate, personal way. And that within that, in the midst of this life, once we accepted Jesus as Lead and forgive in our lives by acknowledging with our mouths He's the Son of God, believing in our hearts He's died and rose again and following Him, that there are times when this world gets a little overwhelming, the season gets a little bit tough, and there's times that He makes us lay down in green pastures. And I think the first week just has a lot of really inviting imagery, just green pastures. I like that. I like the still waters. I like being led by Him on paths of righteousness for His name's sake. It's very kind of an encouraging invitation to rest. Last week, we moved into kind of another section where all of a sudden we're not in the green grass, we're not by the still waters, but we are now traveling through the ravine of deep darkness. We're now going through the valley of death. Now we're dealing with these situations when the world is overwhelming, when there's times that we just are not able to find a blade of grass, let alone a whole field. But we saw how the Lord chooses, if we lean into Him, we're following Him on these paths of righteousness, sometimes He will guide us through those times to get us to higher ground, to new pastures, because He knows what would happen if we stayed here, and why it's scary, and why we don't like change, and why we don't like transition, especially when it feels like it's outside of our own control, that we can look at Him and say, no, wait, that's right, You are the shepherd. I will fear no evil. You choose to use the rod of discipline to comfort me. You choose to use the staff of direction to comfort me. And so I can boldly follow You through some of the most intense, incredible, overwhelming circumstances, knowing that even though I don't see it, You're just taking me over the hill. You're just taking me to the next section. Today we have even a little bit more of a twist. We're going to move from the imagery of the shepherd, without losing it. Keep it in mind. We got to keep all those attributes in mind. But all of a sudden, the psalmist David, who has written this incredible song in what appears to be an incredibly tough season in his life, he switches to talking about him as a shepherd and starts talking to him about as a host. As a host. So if we look in verse 5 and verse 6, we pick up the conversation from that vantage point. In verse 5, he says, You, host, You, Lord, prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup, it overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So once again, I think we're going to see some of the vantage points that build on the other talks that we have done, but also give us some new perspective on how much the Lord loves you. So we're going to start breaking it apart, just like we've done weeks before, in kind of an expository way, and let the Spirit bring it together in the end, however He wants to bring it all together for us. But if we start with the first line, we're already pulling up many different attributes that are pretty interesting, at least to me, and since I'm the one with the microphone, you have to listen to. You, God, You, Lord, choose to prepare for me a table. When we go back to the psalm, and again, there's so much more to the psalm that we're not even covering because 3 weeks is just not enough time. If you go back, and let's say later this afternoon, or maybe this week, you want to do a study, from an interesting vantage point, read through Psalm 23 of all the things God chooses so that you can sing this song. All things that he has control over that he doesn't have to do, but he does because his love for you mandates it. You choose to open the door that you can be my shepherd. You choose to guide me. You make me lay down. You lead me on these paths. You take and comfort me with the rod and staff. You're interactive with me in such a passionate way, an interactive way. You want to grow me. All these different things that are within this are God choosing to do things because he loves you. This is not a king from a distance. This is a personal Messiah. This is a personal friend. This is a personal lead and comfort and provider and physician that is acting on our behalf. You choose to prepare for me a table. And when I look at that, I think about the times that we prepare different events at our house. We love hosting people. We love having different events over there, whether it be from family, physically, or family here, and being able to have people together, whether it be a cookout or campfire or just kind of an open house like we do at Christmas time and have everybody over to the house. And we generally don't like cleaning for it, but we like preparing for it. Does that make sense? Like there's fun part of preparation, and then there's running the vacuum, and no one wants to do that in my house. So we had a daughter. So we had, no, I'm kidding. That's horrible. That's horrible. She also cooks. But no, Jenny actually is the one who cooks most of the time, and our daughter, Emily, is now, in the last year, starting to enjoy that as well. So usually when we're preparing for things, unless if it's a cookout or if it's pizza, it's Jenny. And even when it's the cookout, she prepares everything. I'm just the one taking it out on the deck. I'm the one who brings it back in, and then I'm done. That's kind of my skill level there. And when it comes to pizza, not to be a sexist, but it takes a man to order that correctly. Okay, I really was looking for more support from the men. Grant, you're there? Okay. Most of them were just like, Pastor, we abandon you here. Oh, anyways, but I had to go pick it up too. But no, she loves to cook. She does the dessert. She does the pasta. She does the whole 9 yards from that standpoint. My general job is usually the decorating, and I know that doesn't make me sound any more manly than a few moments ago, but I do. I love decorating. I like getting the speakers out in just the right way so the music's kind of even kill around the house. I like taking and making sure all the accent lighting is correctly, and I even know the word accent lighting. But the antiques, certain ways, so there's some conversation pieces or something people are kind of bored. They have some things to look at. We really, truly enjoy preparing for those events because of the anticipation that we're going to be a family. The anticipation that we're going to share stories and we're going to laugh and we're going to probably talk to the side about maybe something you're going through or I'm going through, that we're going to take and play games together, that we're going to fellowship, and that we're going to invest in each other's lives, and we're going to have this intimate time together is something we greatly enjoy and greatly love preparing for. And here is your God saying, I want to prepare for you. I want to invite you in. I want to be able to have that kind of relationship with you. Whatever that looks like, he prepares the table for you as a servant. Now, understand this. In this particular text, it's not talking about he prepares a table so someday when I die and go home, then the table's ready for me to go. That's not what he's talking about here. Certainly, Jesus is very clear that I go and prepare a place for you. If it was not so, I would tell you. But that's not what he's talking about here, because David is saying, you prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. And I'll tell you what, when I'm home, my enemies ain't there. This is the presence of my enemies. This is my God preparing in the past and in today and tomorrow. He is constantly saying, Tom, sit at the table. I've got something for you. Come here. I've got something prepared for you, something that I want to lay out before you, in spite of the fact that your enemies are around. I'll tell you, when I first looked at this study, I kind of visualized it in my head in our dining room. Many of you guys have been there. If you haven't, we've got to rectify that. But sitting at the table with Jesus, preparing this meal for me, and that all the enemies are kind of outside those windows and the doors, and they're trying to get in and stuff, but they're kind of held back, and I have the opportunity to kind of focus on the Lord. That was kind of my mental image when I first started talking about this. But then as I studied it more, I realized in David's day, a lot of times when the banquet was prepared, not every time, but several of the times, it was when they had made some sort of treaty, half-half treaty with their enemies that are around them. And there was larger armies around them. There was larger nations around them. But they would make some sort of treaty, and to celebrate that or to seal it in the place, the enemies would all sit and dine together. And if you watch any of those movies of those kind of days or whatnot, it wasn't probably the most comfortable gathering of like, whoo, thank God we're all past that, huh? Okay, whoop, good job. They still hated you. There was still a threat. You still knew that the treaty was maybe just for a moment, just for a period of time. And I got to trying to figure that out. If all of a sudden now I'm sitting at the table and my enemies of loneliness, my enemies of depression, my enemies of anger, my enemies of my sin, the enemies of taking and having this roller coaster ride of life around me, the enemy of Satan himself coming out against a child of God is sitting at the table. There's in the room. But the difference that it made was David saying, but I focus on the host. I look to the host. He prepares a table for me. Doesn't matter what all these other goofballs are doing. The focus is to him. And I want to suggest to you, I truly believe that all of us are much better skilled at looking at the enemies than we are skilled at looking at Jesus Christ, and looking at what he's doing in the moment and what it does. I have a quote I'll share with you. This is from Charles Spurgeon. If you're not familiar with Spurgeon, you're probably not a pastor or theologian or that kind of crowd. He's kind of a giant in those areas. But he was talking about this scripture, and he says, but observe, thou preparest a table, just as a servant does. Just as a servant does when she unfolds the damask cloth and displays the ornaments of the feast of an ordinary, peaceful occasion. Nothing is hurried. There is no confusion. There is no disturbance. The enemy's at the door, and yet God prepares a table. And the Christian sits down and eats as if everything was in perfect peace. Oh, the peace which Jehovah gives to his people, even in the midst of the most trying circumstances. Oh, how much your God loves you. And I know Satan and I know the enemies are trying to steal from that, from all kinds of circumstances. Every one of us have a different story. Every one of us have different details. But all of us know what it's like to be in the valley of the shadow of death. All of us know what it's like to have the enemy sitting in the room when you're just trying to be faithful. All of us know what it's like to stumble and to fall and be distracted instead of sitting secure with your daddy, laying out the table for you. If we can just change our focus, we would no longer be Christians with the I hate Mondays, I can't get through this week, everything blows, everything's falling apart for me mentality. Things would change if we could just focus on the host. Doesn't sound so simple. And the weird thing is, it's not simple. But the even stranger part is, it's unbelievably simple. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. These are two things that come from him as he chooses to do when we stop and choose to focus in on him. You still see the interplay? He chooses to take and make the table. You choose to sit. He chooses to give you wonderful, bountiful things in the midst of your circumstances. You choose to focus on him. And when you focus on him, two things happen. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Those two things do not happen when we take in fellowship with the enemy instead of the host. So as we focus in on him, he anoints my head with oil. Let's look at that a little bit, because again, we have to look from David's perspective. We got to understand from David's standpoint what he's talking about within that time. And there's definitely two different ways that we can go within this. One is kind of going back to a couple weeks ago, well, no, last week, when we talked about oil being used as a healing agent. You remember we talked about the sheep's leg being broken and being healed and cared for so that it would grow? This is very true here. He anoints us for healing. In the midst of those circumstances, I'll tell you what, I'm just begging you, God, give me oil from my, just keep me going. Give me that fresh anointing. Give me that fresh healing. But in the same way, when we look at this culture in this time, especially in these banquets with the enemy, a lot of times when you anoint the head with oil, there's great symbolism there as well within that relationship. One, the head is very pivotal a lot of times when you look at things from a scriptural standpoint. This is where our mentality is. This is the part of the body that leads the rest of the body. The head is talked about in many different ways, so this is a very pivotal standpoint. A lot of times it's the head or the heart. He's not talking about the emotions. You anoint, you heal, and you right here where everything kind of matters, where it all comes together, where my focus in, because realistically, when I'm focused on the enemies, it's usually not a heart issue, it's a head issue. So you're tending to me where it really matters the most. And when they did this, for those that were coming to the banquets, it was a sign that I choose you. It was a sign that I honor you. It's a sign that I lift you up and acknowledge you in a special way, was what it meant when you anointed someone else's head with oil. So as you come to the table and you look to the host, this is what Daddy does. Daddy looks to you and says, I am so thrilled that you're here. You are my honored guest. You are the one I adore. You are the one that I'm lifting up in this moment. You and I are worth so much of nothing without Jesus Christ. But with him, he lifts us up. Humble yourself for the Lord. He will lift you up. It all comes together. You anoint my head with oil for healing and adoration and love and fellowship. And when I'm at that place with the Lord, my cup overflows. How many are coming here today with just an empty cup? How many of us are just feeling like we're barely getting through? This whole purpose of this study is, God, how do we get our souls restored? We saw the first week, you restore my soul. How do I do it? Come to the table, focus on me. I love you, I honor you, I lift you up. And when we have those moments with the Lord, when we live in those moments in the Lord, then your cup is overflowing. I saw a lady, her name was Megan. She was one of the two keynote speakers of a family ministry conference I was at in Chicago just about 3 months ago. Some of you guys heard about it when I came home. I actually showed a wrap-up video, and a little bit of a talk was in that video. But I love the point she made, and I brought this with me today, just cup-wise. She was sharing about how we get filled. And she was saying that when I hold my cup like this, and I'm looking for it to get filled by the opinions of others and by the circumstances that are around me, or by finances or time, or someone telling me good job or well done within this world, it will never be filled. We will constantly be looking for something that this world just simply cannot provide in and of itself. But when I hold a cup up the way it was designed to be held, and the opening is focused to my Lord, then we start understanding the Psalms better. Then we understand the overflow that comes from the cup. Too many of us are living. Am I the only one? Too many of us are living. But we need to sit. Some of my favorite testimonies of the last couple of weeks of people who taken me up for the invitation and the challenge a couple of weeks ago of just finding a couple hours and taking a blanket and a Bible and a bottle of water and just finding maybe someplace outside or finding a room in the house that's quiet and just spend 2 hours with the Lord. Just 2 hours of prayer and Bible study. Some of my favorite testimonies the last 2 weeks have been from that. And it's simply because we went from here to here. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. Some of these circumstances are not going away, Lord. But my focus on you, you anoint my head for healing. You anoint my head in adoration. You take and make it so my cup overflows. And when you live that kind of life, you know it's crazy awesome? Is it no longer would just affect you, but as it overflows, it affects everyone around you. We talked about one of the challenges the first week that he says, you lead me in paths of righteousness for your name's sake, that we follow him as for one of the reasons, so that we are healthy and secure and growing, so that when those around us in this world who realize, as the Spirit puts on their heart, that they are a lost sheep as well, that they see what it looks like to follow the Good Shepherd, and they too want the Good Shepherd. However, they realize that they're a lost sheep, and they look at the church, or they look at Christians, and they see malnourishment, They see, fur that's all matted. They see broken legs. They see directionless sheep. Why would they ever trust the Lord? We walk in paths of righteousness for his name's sake, where he leads. Now, all of a sudden, we see the opposite side of it. I focus in on you. I put my cup up. All of a sudden, it's overflowing. And people say, that's good. That's lovely. That's pure. That's joy. And so then we can understand the line even more right after it. Surely as I focus on you, surely as one anointed by you, surely as one who has a cup that overflows, surely mercy, goodness are going to follow me all the days of my life. Surely love is going to flow out of my life. Surely everybody that's in the wake of my life, and when I'm acting properly, and don't get me wrong, we all screw up, but get back here real quick to the table, surely following the Lord, my life's going to look different. It's going to impact people. It's going to make a difference. I'm going to lean into my purpose. I'm going to lean into my place. And when people at my workplace think about my God, they're going to see the difference that he makes instead of being the exact same person in the coffee break room with everybody else. When my kids grow up and they start struggling with the things that we go through in our early 20s and our late teens, they're going to say, wait, I remember what mom did when this stress started coming on her. I remember how my father acted when everything was falling apart. And I remember what it looks like to follow Jesus Christ and to sit at his table. That is a legacy. My kids will be lucky to get anything out of a will. But they surely can know the love of Jesus Christ and what it looks like in a life displayed. Surely mercy and goodness will follow me all the days of my life. And the last one, and I love the fact that it ends with the one that is my choice. I shall, it's a personal choice, dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I choose to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The word for house here, if you go to Hebrew, and I tried to sound all fancy, and like I just got out of seminary yesterday, is also house and will. You put the two together. His house is his will. I choose to dwell in his will forever. I choose to be at the table. I choose to follow him on the paths of righteousness. I choose to let him in. And today, that's exactly the decision that I'm making. And that's where we end up in the middle of these things. This is the type of life that we can have. We can continue to struggle. We continue to have the challenges. We continue to take and go through status quo. You will survive this life. And someday, you'll go home, and it's done. But he did not design us to survive, die, and go home. He designed us to live and to reach out into this world and to show people what it looks like and to learn discipline and learn passion and learn evangelism and learn how to be generous out of the overflow that we have in our lives. Will you choose to do that today? So I was sharing with you, I talked to you about a sermon series I've been watching on Right Now Media. Again, a lot of you guys have that. If you don't, let us know. We'll get you hooked up with that. It's kind of a Netflix, a video Bible study. It's crazy. It's awesome. And I've been following one on Psalm 23 that is actually in the women's section, which is not boding for me well with the rest of this sermon, but nonetheless, it's really good. Really good. And her name's Nancy something or other. Still do not have her last name. But she said, when we simply put it all together, we all have an overwhelming need. And when we focus in on the shepherd and we give him control, when we lean into the host at the banquet table, that overwhelming need gets met with overwhelming grace. And as we relish, as we try to get our heads around the goodness and the grace of our God for you, then it should produce, should it not, an overwhelming gratitude, like we see in David in Psalms 23. And then should not our gratitude turn into overwhelming generosity? changes everything. It changes the way we look at our schedule. It changes the way we handle our checkbook. It changes the way we spend our downtime. It changes how we see each other within the church. It changes how we see ourselves within the mission fields that we're in, within our jobs and our neighborhoods. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lay down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me on paths of righteousness and no other path for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of deep darkness, I choose, I will not fear, because you are with me. Your rod of discipline, your staff of direction, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup, it overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And today I choose to dwell in the will of the Lord, the house of the Lord, forever, for the rest of these days.